Again for being here, and again, come and visit us, come and see us, be here with us. Our next discussion is going to be a Native American communities and reflections on the healing and caring of a medicine man. We're going to have Dr. Phil Smith and his daughter, Farina King and Will King, interviewing him. So this roundtable discussion is going to be between him and from the Navajo Nation Health Services that he's worked for years and decades, and his daughter, who is a doctor of, History, doctor of history at Tahlequah at NSU, and his grandson, William, is going to interview him. These are historians, and he's a Diné physician, and he's descended from many traditional healers. They're going to discuss the intergenerational struggles and the historicide of the COVID-19 and the path of healing in the Navajo Nation. So, Dr. Phil, Dr. Farina, and Will.
Hi, Farina. Hi, Will. Nice to meet you, Dad.
Hello, everyone, and CEO. Farina King, Yenishye. My name is Farina King, and Shayaj, my son here, is William King Wolye. His name is Will. Say hi.
Hi.
Will, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself?
So I'm in 6th grade, and I enjoy swimming and doing other physical activities and listening to stories about my culture.
Awesome. And what is your culture? Maybe because for those who aren't familiar,
we're Navajo from the Towering House clan.
Yeah, so in Navajo, Diné, as we say, it's very important to introduce yourself through your clans, your family. It's sort of like how a lot of people of European American descent, we have last names, and you can know who are your cousins, your relatives by doing family history and saying, hey, you have King, a last name that I do, so you can make those connections. Well, Navajos have a kinship system, a clan system, and that's how we introduce ourselves and recognize our relations wherever they are. And it also is very place-based. So we do have the sense of citizenship as well. The Navajo Nation has different standards, like all different tribal nations throughout the country, of how they recognize, who are considered citizens or members of those tribal nations. So we are citizens of the Navajo Nation, but then we traditionally introduce ourselves by clans. And that establishes our relations, where you would also know that Shajee, my father, Dr. Phil Smith, he's my father, and who my mother is, and people would be able to know who our grandparents are and those kind of relations. So I'll do that, and that will also help to give some background about all of us here, because we're family, sharing with you an important this important conversation about Native American communities and reflections on healing and caring of a medicine man. In Diné, we say Hatathle, an ancestral healer, traditional healer, and that's with my father, Shajee, Dr. Phil Smith. So I'll introduce myself. She'e Bilagana Nishle, Do Kiaani Bashish Chin, Bilagana Dashache, Do Sinajini Dashanale Akot Egoat Sa Nishle. So I shared that I acknowledge my mother and my maternal relatives, that we are of white, English, American settler descent. My mother, Joanne Smith, is from Michigan. And then we say that we are born for our father and our paternal relatives. So my father is Towering House Clan, Kia'ani, as Will shared. And he is born for my, paternal grandfather was Blackstreet Woods people, Sinajini clan. And my dad is from part of Diné called Navajo land, called Rehoboth, or as they say, Seyanichi, because of the red cliffs and the red hills, the different rock formations in the area, which is near parts that some Diné might recognize, or people from that part of the Southwest. Church Rock, Yambuto, what we call the checkerboard area because of the influences of history, railroads coming in and parceling different parts of Navajo land, or it's Navajo land, or, seen as state land of New Mexico, the checkerboard area around Gallup, New Mexico. I hope our internet will be good. So my father, he grew up in that part of Rehoboth. He was born there, and it's near the Rehoboth. That's the Rehoboth Reformed Church, right, Dad? Was that what it's called? The Rehoboth? That Rehoboth Church?
It's a Christian Reformed Church.
Yes, near the Christian Reformed Mission there.
Right. We grew up a little more south of there at Red Springs. Bahana.
Mm-hmm. And Bread Springs south towards Zuni Pueblo. So a lot of interconnections there between Pueblo and Navajo, or Diné, as we call ourselves, the different peoples. So my dad was born there, and that's where a lot of our relatives are still today. And we love to go visit them and see them. And it's another home to us. Oh, I'm like a ghost going in and out. But then my dad, he went to boarding school as a young child. And when he went to boarding school, that was, of course, really hard. And that influenced me as I became a historian, because I loved the stories of my family. I loved learning about what their experiences were growing up. My father's two older brothers, actually, all his older brothers served in World War II. Two of them served as Navajo code talkers, and they were very influential in his life. Maybe he'll talk about that. But my dad descends from a line of Hatatle, traditional healers, as well. That his father, my Nali, as we say, my paternal grandfather, Red Smith, he was Hatatle, and taught my dad a lot about ancestral traditional healing of Diné, and really wanted my father to follow, that practice and those ceremonies and the significance of it. My grandmother, Johanna Haskoutsi, her father was a Hatatle, an ancestral medicine man, a traditional healer, And so, even though a lot of, in English, we hear that term medicine man, Hatatle is what we say in Navajo. And so my father from a young age was, Dad, we hear you chatting there in the background. Thanks. My dad from a young age was exposed to, surrounded by traditional medicine and ideas of healing, how important that was. And his family, those very important figures to him, they taught him the significance of medicine. But then he went, to these different schools, including boarding schools at first. And like I said earlier, those stories really hit me and struck me because, a lot of other people didn't know about Indian boarding schools or the experiences of it, which we're now hearing about, with the Secretary of Interior, Deb Haaland, launching the Federal Initiative of truth and learning and healing from Indian boarding schools. Just that. 1 second. I think I'm going to change this video because it will set it up for me, because it keeps kind of going in and out. So it's fine if you see my background. And so that led me on a journey to become a historian. I'm now an associate professor of history here in Cherokee country and the ancestral homelands of Osage, Caddo, Kickapoo, even Lakota peoples who came into this place over many years in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and work at Northeastern State University that the Cherokee Nation founded as the Cherokee Female National Seminary. So I'm now a Native American Native American historian. That's my main area that I focus on and teach. And my dad has often been my key informant, if you will. I've talked to him so much about so many stories, experiences as he went on to graduate high school, went to college at Brigham Young University, where he met my mom. And then he went to medical school at the University of Utah. And he decided that he did want to pursue medicine, but as a physician working in hospitals and then becoming involved with the Indian Health Service. And after many years working with the Indian Health Service, with their health programs, research, he's interacted and worked with tribal nations throughout the United States. And his work has taken him throughout the world, meeting different Indigenous peoples, Aborigines in Australia, connecting with Native Hawaiians and different peoples, looking and learning from each other of experiences of the impacts of settler colonialism on health and the health needs and initiatives that Indigenous peoples face especially. But after all those years, as he has worked in hospitals in the Navajo Nation, Tuba City, where I was born, in Window Rock area, the headquarters of Navajo Nation, and as I said, with many different tribal nations too, he did retire from IHS and then went back to the medical clinics and worked with Utah Navajo Health System for the last decade or so in Sabi and Disguy in Monument Valley with my mother. And he has worked there and is just now retiring. He also has served as a associate faculty with the Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health, mentoring and teaching about different issues and dynamics with American Indian health. So Will and I know me along with my 3 children. My dad and my mom had 8 children, and so they have many grandchildren and their numerous children, my siblings. We've all learned so much from my father. And we are so happy to be here today with you to share and to have a conversation between grandson and grandfather. And I will be helping to facilitate any questions that you all have. But there's especially a lot to think about and discuss, because we are living through a historic moment of a horrible pandemic that has affected all of us in various ways. And my father was on ground zero, in a sense, in Navajo Nation, which was one of the hardest hit communities in the world, and was there, on the front lines at over 70 years old himself, already had a very full and busy career, but he continued and wanted to continue to serve Diné, his people. And that has always been a really powerful example for me and my family and to so many others. Now he's retiring, but he's going on to become a medical advisor in the Philippines, serving a mission for his church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So he's going to another very different place and continuing to think about how to heal and serve and help others wherever he is. So without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Will, who will mainly be asking and engaging in this conversation with my dad, his Che, grandfather, as we say in Navajo. And then if folks have any questions or anything they would like to comment on, I will try to look at the chat here or receive help from those of our friends at the Museum of Native American History. A special shout out to Mona and Charlotte, Jaslyn, everybody there. Thank you so much. Evan, It's been wonderful to work with you, and we're so excited for this weekend of the Native American cultural and heritage celebration and all the great talks and different events that are happening. These are wonderful resources, so please continue to learn. That's always my big takeaway and emphasis with all this. Thank you. Will, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks, Mom. Now, if we're jumping into the questions right away, so Grandpa, what is it like being a doctor?
That's a very good question, Will. It's a difficult question in the sense that the only thing that makes it different is in terms of where we work and who we interact with. Otherwise, our lives are pretty much the same. It's a very busy setting. And so there are, of course, many types of doctors, doctors that work in public health who don't really see a whole lot of patients, but they're trying to take care of the world, of the nation, of a community as a whole, in preventing disease and providing information on how to take care of themselves. And then you have the physician that works in a clinic and working with ambulatory problems, people who don't need hospital care but need medical care, and then so there's a different type of services that you can provide in a clinic that you can't provide in a hospital. Then in the hospital, actually, you can do many things there as a physician, delivering babies, doing surgery, taking care of people that are really critically ill, or people who just been injured really badly, taking care of cancer patients. And then following, there's physicians that take care of people who, after all these treatments are done, help them in the recovery of things. So I think, having said that, I'll just say there's a lot of support that we have. And so a lot of our changing world of medicine, we now have physician assistants and nurse practitioners and psychologists and psychiatrists that have also started to assume some of the roles that we used to do in the past, and doing it very effectively. And we work with a great team, nurses, respiratory therapists, community health workers, and that work in the team, and people who help to handle the insurance and work with the computer systems that are just as important that in making the clinic, hospital, and the health systems work. But I think overall, when you ask what is it like being a doctor, I think it's fun. It was very enjoyable, very, very rewarding, because it allowed you to help people who needed help. And sometimes you help people who didn't want the help, but later discovered that they were that they needed the help, and came back later after they realized that we were just trying to help and not be intrusive in their lives. So overall, it's a very happy life for me. At least my experience has been very good, and I've really enjoyed that interaction. It's a profession that makes you interact with all sorts of people, from the time before they're born, when you're taking care of a mom who's pregnant and trying to make sure that the little fetus that's developing in the mom's womb develops well, so that it's born with no problems, and taking care of the little baby when they come out, and then taking care of them each month, coming in for immunizations and well child checks, and then watching them as they go to Head Start and to school, and then having them start doing sports and examining them, and then proceeding on, and taking care of their parents, their grandparents. I was in family and community medicine, so I was able to do that wide scope of setting. And to be able to take care of someone who was 95 years old. And actually, I think John Holliday was over 100 when he passed away, and it was a joy to take care of him. I wasn't the only one to take care of him because I had to refer him to the cardiologist, the pulmonologist, and others who helped me take care of him. But after he went to the specialty clinics, he would come back to me, and I would have to take care of the things the specialists recommended, and it was a joy to work with him.
Wow, that's very interesting. But why did you want to become a doctor?
I think it was something that started very early in my life, but it wasn't that I wanted to become a medical doctor like a doctor of medicine in the Western world. I think it was more like trying to help be a healer, which is what we think of when we think of health providers in the traditional medicine and the provisions of it. My dad was a healer. He performed ceremonies for oftentimes for a lot of people who looked completely well, but they were really troubled by different things and couldn't function very well. And he would perform prayers and ceremonies for them. All these different ceremonies were not the complex ceremonies that some other healers provided, but he did all of the, 1 day, 3 day, the 5 day ceremonies. He didn't do any of the fire dances that we never see anymore today because those healers have all passed away. And he is also a diagnostician. What that means is he would help diagnose, what might be the problem with the person in their sphere of life. In the Navajo way, we oftentimes looked at what has happened in the person's life that causes the problem. And so it's a more of a three-dimensional type of approach to healing rather than a real linear thing to say, well, it was this bacteria that caused this infection. The Navajo would say, well, you did something to something, back 3 months ago that you disrupted the harmony of the cosmos in the world. I'm trying to translate from Navajo into English and trying to explain this because to most non-native, what I'm saying almost appears to be silly. To say that it's almost like saying you got sick because a black cat crossed your path. Most people would look at it that way, but we don't. Oftentimes as Native people, we would look at things saying the world is one eternal round, that we can't affect one part of it without affecting our health or other things. And so I watched my father do that. And when I say he was a diagnostician, he was a hand trimmer, and he would have people come by and he would tell them, well, this is a problem that you need to go to the white man's hospital to take care of. Or he would say, you did this, and so you need to have a Hojonja ceremony, or you need to go do the snake ceremony, or the eagle ceremony, or you have to make restitution to a pottery took from the Anasazi ruins, or something like that. And the other thing that I was going to say was that when he was doing that, my father, Shijat, would help them, and then people would come back. And interestingly enough, he would help them. he was an herbalist too. And when people hurt themselves, I remember him making little concoctions that they could brew or chew. And people would say, yeah, the pain went away. And all I know is one of the components of that was, a willow a bush that he would cut up and put in with other herbs. And when somebody sprained their ankle or got fell off a horse and was bruised. Anyway, to make a long story short, I saw that happen. And so I saw my family serving, and my mother was that way. She would let everybody come in, people who were on the streets. Our streets, of course, are really long because we don't have regular streets. I don't know why I said streets, but our homes were pretty isolated. Like the next neighbors were like about 3 miles away. But if somebody, say the parents of a young boy had died, my mom would take them in and take care of them. And so I saw that. And so as I grew older, I wanted to help and be like that. And when I got to college, I wanted to help out. So when I was in college, I was members of clubs that did service, like the Key Club, which was sponsored by the Kiwanis Club, and we did service projects. And when I was at BYU, I was working with SOS, or Students Organized to Serve, and we did a lot of things working with different people. But I wasn't thinking of being a doctor because everybody, all of the people at the boarding school and in my high school told us, that we can't handle math or science and stuff like that. I was very fortunate because I had a couple of teachers that really influenced me. And the reason I went to Brigham Young University was mainly because Ellen Wilson, who was a Harvard graduate, was teaching languages at our high school. I think he was a conscientious objector who was serving his time. And he was teaching us Arabic, and I took a German and Arabic class from him. And he says to me, he wasn't my counselor, but he was a mentor to me. And he said, Phil, if you want a job in the future, learn Arabic, learn Chinese, and go to Princeton or Stanford or BYU. He said, if you go to any one of those schools, you will become fluent. You'll be a level 5 for government, and you'll have a job forever. So I went to look at the tuition costs. When I was going to college, there was not the scholarships that were available today. So I had to work. I worked in cleaning rooms at 4 a.m. till 7, and then go to class. And then I would wait on tables later in the evening to pay for my education, because my tuition was paid for because I got an academic scholarship, but I had to have money for food. And so waiting tables was really good because the restaurant would give you food. And anyway, so I went there, and in the process got converted to Christianity, which my dad and family did not really like. They were all traditional people, not believing anything in the Euro-Christian denominations, and in fact were averse to them. And so they literally kicked me out of the house, so to speak. And then I was left to fend for my own from that point on. And I found refuge in education. And while I was serving as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I got exposed to where I had to help people a lot, because I came back to the Navajo reservation and help people with their home life. Alcoholism was a problem, and there was some Mary one time who went into labor, and we were about 70 miles from the Crown Point Hospital over a bumpy road. And in our mission, we serve as companions with another missionary, and he was driving, and Mary and I were in the back, and I was, sort of praying that she wouldn't deliver because I didn't know what to do, but all of a sudden she says, "I think the baby's going to come," and then all of a sudden, fluid started coming all over her legs, and she said, "You got to help me, and here's what you do." And so she taught me through on how to deliver her little boy. And then when the boy came out, we got an old rag to clean off the face and clean out everything, and it started to cry. And then she said, "You got to tie off the umbilical cord." And so she gave me a string, and I did that. And probably not the most sanitary thing, and a lot of times people did that, and the umbilical cord would get infected. So I probably wasn't doing things that are right. But the baby was healthy, and we got to the Crown Point Hospital, and then the doctors came running out with the nurses, and they whisked him away and left us there. And I thought, this might be something I want to do. And when I got back to Brigham Young University and ran across a friend in chemistry class, in analytical chemistry class, I changed my major, because these were happening. These were the late 60s and early 70s when the Israeli-Arab war was going on, and the Arab instructors had gone and left the country. And so BYU did not have the continuing program that they had before. So I switched over to chemistry, and in chemistry class, Gary Silver, a colleague in class, was president of Epsilon Delta, which was a pre-med honor society, and he invited me to join since I had good grades and everything, and I became the secretary for the club, and then the rest is history. I studied hard and applied to many schools, and I think it looked back as that the Great Spirit really helped me. Because affirmative action was going on at its peak, and medical schools were looking for students that did very well in the sciences. And so I was able to be accepted in the medical school, and I wanted to be a family physician, which was a new specialty at that time. And so I focused on that, thinking I would come back to the reservation. And I did. I got boarded in family and community medicine at the university, and then later did a fellowship in preventive medicine and preventive health, and was able to work a long time with the Indian Health Service, and then later with the tribal clinics with the Utah Navajo Health Systems.
Thanks, Dad. I think also something I forgot to mention when I was introducing you and talking with Will is I wrote my first book, The Earth Memory Compass, really influenced by your boarding school experiences. And then now I'm writing another book about interweaving your experiences with medicine, with these issues of, disease and struggles and health. And what you mentioned really brings together that life and health can be more than physical for people, mental health, all these various dynamics of a life, of a people's life. So I did want to mention that too. And so many stories, incredible experiences. Thank you for sharing that. It's something that I'm very grateful to be working with you, and here people are getting a window into some of our conversations that we have. And it's wonderful to have Will here listening and engaging with you too. because it started for me in my youth of listening to your brothers, Uncle Albert and George, and aunties, Phyllis and Yvonne and Diane and Florence, who we love, and sadly, has passed on because of COVID-19. And that's why these stories are so precious for youth and elders to engage, interact with each other. They are so empowering and strengthening to learn, where did you come from? How did you get to where you are? And a lot of people feel, the medical profession is difficult, very challenging. And you're getting into that, of how, funding and all the knowledge you have to carry and the pressures of life and death. It's really hard. Will, do you want to continue asking some questions?
Yeah. Thank you. What do you want kids to know about healing?
I think one of the things that I think I'd like the children to know is that the human body is something that the Creator made in a very, very special way. And you've already experienced that, Will, when you've cut yourself and you'd see a wide open wound, bleeding and open and hurting. And, but as you cleaned the wound and as you brought the torn skin back together, and either with a suture or with a Band-Aid or a steri strip, you wait a little while and then you take off the Band-Aid, and then you realize that the skin had healed. And that's a very good way of seeing what happens with the body. The body is designed so that, by God and the Creator in such a way that the body can heal itself in many ways, but sometimes you need the help of others to do that. And as Farina talked about it, healing involves a lot of things, not just your physical setting, but there's a spiritual component to it, an emotional component to it, and a mental component to it. And one of the things where we forget is that to be in good health doesn't mean you just don't have any disease. Because sometimes people that are completely healthy can have a real bad health problem. And these are things like health issues that involve the mind and the emotions, where people might get depressed. At school, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I experienced bullying when I was in the boarding school and got beat up. And I remember running away and almost freezing to death because I wanted to run away from the bullying. And there was a counselor who, it's sort of funny when I look back at it. Archie Boone was his name. And he was a Zuni man who said to me, when I went crying to the principal at the boarding school, and she did nothing. And I said, well, what can I do? And they said, well, everybody just thinks you're a crybaby, and you just go to them. They don't do anything. Says you have to fight back. And so he says, next time they're fighting, don't just curl up in a ball. He says, you got to fight back. I know it was probably something, he wouldn't let anybody know to do that, but he was caring for me. He said, that's what, he said, we can't always protect you. So you got to protect yourself. You got to defend yourself sometimes from these bullies. And so the next time the bullies came by, there was 3 of them. And they were picking on me, and then I said, "Do you stop that right now?" And this, of course, was all said in Navajo. even though we're not supposed to speak Navajo. We're yelling at each other, and then one of them hit me in the mouth, and I hit back, and of course the three of them all jumped on me and really beat me up, and I went, I was thinking, should I go over to the principal and let him know, the teacher know that this happened? And then I thought, no, I'll go to Archie. And Archie, I said, I can't do this. It's hurting too much. And then he said this to me. He says, Phil, he says, you got to fight. When you get in a fight, he said, don't get in any fights. But if you ever get in a fight, the only time you need to do that is when you're going to fight to the death. And I was 11 going on 12 at the time. And he says, are you willing to fight to the death? And of course, as an 11-year-old, I'm going, no, I don't want to fight to the death, But as I think about it later, I thought, well, what does he mean? It means that even though your nose was bloody, you still are punching back to get the kids away from you. So I thought, well, I can't defend him. So I got a big stick and I used to carry it around. It was not a really big stick. I was whittling on it, and it was about 3 foot long. And when they started bullying me and they were hitting me on the head, I pushed them away. And of course, they punched me in the face again. But this time I didn't just curl and cry. I grabbed the stick and started beating on them as well. And then they ran away, and they ran to the principal. And the principal, of course, punished me for that. But one thing that happened was they never bullied me again. And I've never really gotten in any fights again, but because of that, because I feel like if there's ever a fight I'm in, it's going to be to the death. But the healing didn't come until later. I realized that was wrong. That's part of healing, is when you realize that you're not affected by what people do to you. It's how you react to them. And in depression, when you're healed, it's when you all of a sudden have a full life. And that's healing. It's when you are happy and you're productive and you want to live forever. That's healing, when you have joy in your life and peace in your life.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, that's when you are 11, turning 12. Could you imagine having to face that? You're away from your family and don't have your mom and dad there to help take care of you in that way.
Yeah.
That's really, really hard. And that's a big part of why even right now, a lot of the conversation about Indigenous experiences in boarding schools and residential schools in Canada with the First Nations and tribal nations here in the United States, it's a lot about healing because of that intergenerational trauma. No child, I never had to tell my son, fight to the death. I can't imagine that. And that's something, thank you. It's something very powerful that you carry with you, of how you're still, healing from that and helping others to heal from that. That there were other children, Diné and other Native Americans who faced those kind of, that kind of trauma. And when we talk about healing, it isn't necessarily, like you said, something in terms of take this pill, you're over it, or here's the Band-Aid, the wound will heal. It's not all physical. There's other experiences that Native Americans have, including yourself, Dad. Shije, thank you for bringing that up and mentioning it. Yeah, that's crazy, huh?
Speaking of family, what did your father teach you about healing and medicine?
Yeah, I know you talked about that already, but that's another great point of coming around to it again.
I think what he was telling me about is that the key point that he told me is that people have got to want to be healed. And he said, we can do a lot of things to help them, But if they won't help themselves, then the healing doesn't happen. And I crossed over into the medicine, the allopathic medicine that I practice. I can tell somebody what to do about diabetes, but if they don't change their diet, they don't exercise, they don't watch what they eat, they don't take the medication we give them, their diabetes just get worse and worse. If they don't change the dressing on a wound that got infected, it takes a longer time to heal. Or if they don't visit, the counselor when they're having problems with alcohol or having depression, if they won't come in and work with them, and if they don't go and do the things that we tell them that will help them to cope and heal, that came true. So what my dad told me about healing is that the people have got to want to do it. And then secondly, as important was, he said, you can heal them physically, but they need to be healed spiritually and emotionally too. So don't ever forget that. If they want to pray, pray with them and tell them that they need to pray to be healed on some things, because sometimes it takes a while to heal. And that's true, because when you're dealing with cancer, sometimes some things can't be healed, but in the process of doing the healing or trying to heal, they can actually have a quality of life that they wouldn't otherwise have.
Wow, that's very touching. Well, how long have you been a doctor?
Oh, I was just saying that I've been a doctor a long time. I guess what you're asking is, when did I get my license? 1978. So it's been a long time. But I felt like I was doing doctor stuff a little before that.
Yeah. What's your best experience being a doctor?
I've had so much. I think I've shared some things with you about my experience with the AIDS, and when it hit hit us in the United States in the 1980s when we had no treatment, and tell you how I saw the medication and the research that had happened to improve things. But later I was thinking, we've been through a lot of life and death experiences in the hospital, in the ER where I've worked, and in the clinic. You had to take care of somebody choking and somebody having a heart attack, and I'm 3 hours away from the hospital. And those have all been very exciting, and I think I shared those with you. But as I reflected on it, I think, I went back and had written down some things that I remembered. And for some reason, I didn't share it with you, but probably my greatest experiences was delivering my children. We were in Montezuma Creek, 2 hours away from the hospital, and my wife Joanne went into labor, and we had to deliver the baby, 6 weeks early, and I did. So anyway, that was exciting, delivering my daughter Heather, and delivering Farina, and watching them be healthy and kicking. And we were on Lake Powell when my wife went into labor, and we were trying to rush back to Tuba City to the hospital to deliver. Farina was almost born on Lake Powell, but she came, and delivering my son in Fort Defiance Hospital, and the joy of having them do well and my wife do well. I think those were the most exciting.
What do you use any traditional Navajo medicines?
I personally do not. I don't feel like I have the expertise to do that, but I do work with a lot of traditional healers, and I've come to really respect them. I've had an opportunity when I work with the Indian Health Service to interact with traditional healers from the Lakota, from the Comanche, from the Kiowa, from the Fort Sill Apache. And I've even talked to the people from the Cherokee Nation. And so it's been great working with them. They really have a lot to offer us.
Well, thank you so much, Dad, for your time and sharing these stories. There's so much, that I'm really excited to be able to write a book, Diné Doctor. I started a open syllabus for people who are interested. It includes other videos with my dad and others great works. I mean, there's so many people like Annie Wanika, who my dad was able to meet, and so many incredible Diné individuals. I know there's different books and articles out. And so I tried my best to learn about those kind of resources that people can go to my website, farinaking.com, and it's called the Diné Doctor History Syllabus. And it really was inspired by my dad, who was in Navajo Nation. He worked with elders and youth and all kinds of communities, and that he wasn't alone, that there's so many others who organized, brought donations in, developed different programs, and they still are doing that. And so there's a lot of ways to get involved, and that's a great resource. And Will, do you have any thoughts you want to say to Che for his time?
Yeah, I think what you told us about about your boarding school experiences were really interesting, and I'm just kind of glad that I didn't have to go through that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that really strikes me is you went through so much, and our children, we're here because you survived boarding school. And not only did that, but you and among many Diné have thrived, done things to really strengthen community and seek healing, that it isn't just put a Band-Aid on it and it's over, but it's a cyclical process of sana gai bik e hajon, of walk in beauty, live a long life in beauty. And I know you've taught us that as well, Dad, and that you learned that from your ancestors and your parents. So thank you. Ahehe, did you want to leave any parting words as we wrap up here today? And thank everyone for joining us.
I think the only thing I can say is I really appreciate the opportunity to help a little in this conference. I think that these conferences are a great resource to all of us. And while it provides information to the non-native, it really strengthens our resolve to be better people, because it gives us a legacy of learning from the indigenous people, and to make people realize that we do have a lot to offer, not only from our historical perspective, but in terms of what we can do today in bringing, some peace and joy to the people in the world.
Thank you.
Yes.
And thank you, Museum of Native American History. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Bye.
Hagone.
Hagone.